Today I want to share this deck that I originally built because I thought the commander was very interesting, and it quickly became kind of one of my favorite decks. It was a Kroxa and Kunoros budget deck. I made some tweaks to the list, but currently you can get it for about $61, probably a bit more than that depending on where you go. But it is a Reanimator deck in Mardu with Kroxa and Kunoros as the commander. Now, this is a very interesting commander because it is a 6-drop, 6/6 with Vigilance, Menace, Lifelink, so it's got pretty good stats. And when it enters the battlefield or attacks, you may exile 5 cards from your graveyard. When you do, return target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield. This is a pretty powerful effect because when it enters, you immediately get it. But you do need to exile 5 cards, which is quite a lot. So you need to put a lot of cards in your graveyard. How do we do that on a budget? Well, this deck is playing a lot of wheel effects. Besides that, we're also playing a lot of cycling effects. Why are we playing cycling? It's a little bit of a strange mechanic. Whenever you cast a wheel, you discard your hand and draw that many cards. If you're playing cards that do not replace themselves in your hand, you're going to slowly get rid of cards in your hand, and when you wheel, you're just going to be wheeling smaller and smaller amounts of cards. So we generally want to try and keep a similar amount of cards in our hand so that when we wheel, we can discard like 4 or 5 cards and draw 4 or 5 cards. Before I get into the rest of the deck tech, I probably should explain how this deck tends to play out. Usually this deck is a little bit slow to commit to the board. You're playing a lot of cards to put cards in your graveyard and maybe ramping a little bit. And then turn 5 or 6, you're hopefully casting your commander and getting back another big threat. So as soon as turn 5 or 6 rolls around, you play your commander and you're just committing big creatures to the board. These creatures can have a lot of different splashy effects, and you get to make a lot of cool decisions in terms of what cards are you trying to discard, what cards are you going to reanimate. And I think the deck has a lot of fun effects because we have a lot of things stapled onto creatures. We have some unique cards in terms of like cycling effects that, if you have them in your hand in the right situations, can win you games, as well as just kind of fun cards where you're doing damage equal to the mana value of your cards, and we're playing a Reanimator deck. Overall, that's kind of what I like about the deck. Breaking this down into sections, we have the bombs that you're going to kind of want to be reanimating. We have the card draw effects, which will help to keep your hand full. We have a bunch of graveyard filling effects, which will help to get those cards in your graveyard so you can exile and reanimate your bombs. And then we have some effects to give creatures haste, because if you're reanimating a big creature, the best way to get value out of it is be able to swing in immediately. It also works really well with our commander because we can get the end of the battlefield as well as the attack trigger. Now we have a bunch of interaction thanks to some of our cycling cards. This will help us respond to most things that our opponents would be doing. And then of course we have a bunch of ramp effects. Notably, we have a lot of these kind of seize the spoil effects where you discard a card, draw multiple, and create treasure tokens, which work really well with this deck, so we can fill our graveyard and cast our commander a turn or 2 early. Outside of our commander, we also have some reanimation spells, including Mystic's Mastery, which can allow us to reanimate some of the instant or sorceries from our graveyard. This is something to keep in mind when you're exiling your cards, which ones you want to keep in your graveyard, so that maybe you can cast them back with Mystic's Mastery. Then lastly, of course, we have our lands. We're playing a very budget-friendly mana base with mostly basics and other kind of budget-friendly lands. And then lastly, notably, we have Vault of the Archangel, which can give us a little bit of utility in our lands and is a very powerful effect. We're going to go through each of these sections, and we're going to start with the bombs. These are cards that you hope to reanimate and have some kind of impact or just like a kind of big scary threat. Try to go for a lot of the budget friendly ones in the deck list, but if you do have like, I don't know, Valgavoth from Duskmourn, you can stick whatever big cool cards that you pulled from like packs and easily put them in this deck. I think this is one of the really nice things about this deck, is it's pretty like modular. Now the first one we have is Heart Piercer Manticore. Is a 4-drop that when it enters, you may sacrifice another creature. When you do, it deals damage equal to that creature's power to target creature or player. This can allow us to sacrifice one of our big creatures and deal a bunch of damage. There's a specific combo with this card in the deck, which we'll get to. Combustible Gearhulk. This touches on one of the other kind of synergies in this deck. We're playing a Reanimator deck, This card, when it enters, you choose target opponent, and they can have you draw 3 cards or mill 3 cards. And if they mill, they take damage equal to the mana value of those cards milled. So this deck, you want to put cards in your graveyard, so the milling isn't a downside at all. And we're playing a Reanimator deck, so our curve is quite large. You can see quite a lot of high cost cards, so we can hit for a lot of damage if our opponent chooses mill. Atali Primal Storm, I feel like this one's relatively self-explanatory. Whenever Atali attacks, you exile the top card of each player's library, and then you may cast spells from among those without paying their mana cost. Very cool if you can get it attacking, and that's why Haste is so powerful in this deck. Infernal Sovereign is a really cool card that I think is kind of underplayed, honestly. Is 6 mana, 6/6 flying trample. Skip your draw step, but whenever you play a land or cast a spell, you draw a card and lose 1 life. This is a very similar effect to the Endstone, which was that 7 mana mythic artifact from Edge of Eternity. But yeah, this will be helpful to draw a bunch of cards. Toxic Skearhulk, when it enters, you may destroy another target creature and you gain life equal to that creature's toughness. This is really nice because you need removal in the deck, and why not put it on these big creatures with splashy effects? And that life gain can be pretty nice if your opponent has a big creature. Sunblast Angel, this is a creature that has a sweeper stapled onto it, which is crazy, but it works just as a sweeper, and you can like reoccur it if your opponents kill it. I think this is a very powerful effect in the deck. Gisela, Blade of Goodnight, doubles up the damage that your opponents take and halves the damage that you would take. So Punctual Primordial is a really good card in this deck because we're also playing Breach the Multiverse. So if you cast that, you can potentially reanimate up to 6 other creatures. Sarah's Emissary, when it enters the battlefield, you can choose a card type. You and your creatures have protection from that chosen card type. So if you choose creatures, you can't take damage from creatures. Your creatures cannot be blocked. So this is a really powerful effect. And if you can get a Lightning Greaves on this, your opponent's going to have a little bit of trouble actually swinging in for lethal if your opponent's doing combat. So very powerful effect. Soul of Eternity is a really cool card in this deck. It says its power and toughness are each equal to your life total. Now we touch back onto Heartpiercer Manticore. When it enters, you can sacrifice another creature and it deals damage equal to that creature's power to target creature or player. So we have Soul of Eternity on the battlefield. We get Heartpiercer Manticore on the battlefield. We sacrifice the Soul of Eternity. We deal damage equal to our life total to our opponent. That should hopefully one-shot our opponent. Our commander has lifelink, so we should hopefully have more life than our opponents. So yeah, it is a really cool combo. Additionally, we touched upon it in the lands. Additionally, we're playing Vault of the Archangel, so if we give our Soul of Eternity lifelink and swing in, we can just double our life total. The Balrog of Moria, it's a big hasty trampler, and when it dies, we can exile creature from each opponent, which is cool. Furthermore, it has cycling, so we can cycle it and make 2 treasure tokens, which allows us to ramp into our commander. Ashen Rider, this is another creature removal stick. When it enters the battlefield or dies, we can exile target permanent. Exile removal is really nice, and it's attached to a creature, so we can reoccur it. Ulamog's Dreadsire, this is another one that if we have haste is pretty crazy because we reanimate it, we tap it immediately, make a 10/10, we can swing in with that 10/10, just a 10 mana 10/10 with vigilance and ward, just a big body. This is one of the ones that you can probably easily swap out. But and then lastly, in our bombs here, Pathrazer Ulamog 9/9 Annihilator 3, can't be blocked by except 3 or more creatures. That wraps up all the cards that I would consider as bombs in this deck, but there are still lots of other cool cards in the deck. For instance, in our very short card draw section here, we have Keen Duelist. At the beginning of your upkeep, you and target opponent each reveal the top card of your library. You each lose life equal to the mana value of the card revealed by the other player. And then you get to put that card in your hand. You still get to draw your card for your turn. So basically, you draw an additional card, and one target opponent draws an additional card, but you get to deal damage equal to the mana value of that card on top of your library. The opponent does the same, but since we're playing a Reanimator deck, our cards have really high mana value, and so we get to do lots of damage. It's just a really fun effect. If you haven't tried it before, highly recommend Keen Duelist just for a little bit of fun in your commander games. Again, it touches on the high mana cost sub-theme of the deck and trying to do damage equal to it. Our other card draw effect also can deal damage equal to the mana cost, Palantir of Orthonac. This card basically gets to put more and more influence counters on, and your opponent either lets you draw a card, or you mill equal to the number of influence counters, and they lose life equal to the total mana value of those cards. So again, card draw, mill, what's not to like. Now in terms of graveyard filling, we have some of the more well-known ones. We have Faithless Looting, Stitcher Supplier, Cathartic Reunion. Grass's Tunnel Grinder is one of our wheels in the deck that allow us to discard any number of cards from our hand and then draw that many +1. Furthermore, we can eventually flip it into a very powerful land that allows us to discover whenever we cast a permanent spell. Really good in the deck, lets you put a bunch of cards in your graveyard, which is important for the Exile 5. Cemetery Tampering allows you to mill at the beginning of your upkeep and maybe cast a Hideaway card for free. Generally, you're not going to be casting the Hideaway card because you're exiling so many whenever you cast your commander, but we just need to get cards in our graveyard, so we don't really mind. Dirge of the Dead. It's another one of these cycling cards that has maybe a little bit of utility here. Either we can cast it and give all creatures fear, so they can't be blocked unless the opponent has artifact creatures or black creatures, or we can cycle it and give a single creature fear. But it's just nice. 2 mana, cycle, draw a new card. Helps to put cards in your graveyard and helps you keep your hand stocked up for your wheels. Shadow the Perception, this is a wheel with flashback. Change the Fortune, it is a wheel, but it also counts additional cards you've discarded. Heartwarming Redemption, this is a wheel that you gain life equals the number of cards in your hand. Into the Night, it's one of the wheels where you can choose any number of cards and then you draw that many. Also makes it day and night, so you do have to track that. Kind of one of the big downsides of this card, but it's not that bad. Path of the Pyromancer, this is a really fun wheel because you discard all the cards in your hand and then you add mana for each card discarded this way. Timeless Dragon, this is one of our cycling cards. We're playing some of the land cycling cards. We're playing a very budget-friendly mana base, and having these land cycling cards allow us to find our different mana types that we want, and they're also just big creatures that you don't entirely mind getting back if you have nothing better to do. Leave Chance, this is a card that in your graveyard, it's a wheel, which is quite nice, and then the instant speed effect, maybe you'll find use for it, but mostly we're playing it for get it into the graveyard, and then you have this wheel that you can cast back at a later time. Oliphant, this is another one of the land cycling cards. Rune Grinder, it's a land cycling card that also, if it dies, everybody wheels, which is interesting. Troll of Khazad-dûm, it's a land cycling card, and it's also, one of the more decent bodies on a land cycling card. Angel of Runes, this is a very, very good land cycling card because it also allows us to deal with artifacts and enchantments. So just more interaction, removal, stapled onto our creatures that we can get back very easily with our commander. Another land cycling card that has a little bit of impact if you get it back. And then Rampaging War Mammoth, it's a cycling card where you can maybe remove some things. Now for our haste effects, we have Bitter Reunion. Enters, discard a card, draw 2 cards, and then you can sacrifice it and give your creatures haste. So this does everything that we could want. Lightning Greaves, protection, haste, what's not to like. Anger, gives your stuff haste if you control a mountain and it's in your graveyard. We like the graveyard synergies and we like having haste. Very nice. Now for interaction, we're getting into some of the spicy cycling cards. They seem really jank, but trust me, I've had so much fun playing these cards because I've actually won several games thanks to just a few of these cycling cards at the right time. So I highly recommend playing some of these, including Angel Song. This is a fog that you can cycle for 2 mana. This is probably one of the best ones. Just being able to stop a lethal swing and then crack back can win you so many different kinds of games. Clear, enchantment removal, you can cycle. Easy prey, small creature removal that you can cycle. Go for the blood. Maybe the creature's bigger. You can instead fight their creature with your big commander, or you can just cycle it for 1 mana. Forsake the Worldly. This is really good removal that you can also cycle because you exile target artifact or enchantment. So if your opponent has a 1 ring, this can deal with it. Touch the Spirit Realm. This can exile artifacts or creatures, but it also has this really cool channel effect that allows you to blink something out until the beginning of next end step. So maybe your opponent's swinging at you with a big creature. You can blink it out. It's going to be removed from combat. You're not going to take any damage. It comes back at their next end step. You didn't remove their creature, so hopefully they don't hate you. And you didn't die, so that's also pretty good. Alternatively, you can blink your own stuff. So you could blink your commander, get it back, get the new ETB trigger, and reanimate something else. Or maybe you blink something out in response to a sweeper. So I really like the flexibility of Touch the Spirit Realm in this deck. It's got discard, it's got removal, it's got blink, all sorts of shenanigans that just feels like it fits in this style of deck. Fateful Showdown, this is a wheel. You also get to deal damage equal to the number of cards in your hand to a creature or player. Limits of Solidarity, this is probably one of my favorite cards in the deck, honestly. It is a threaten effect that you can cycle. It's just so satisfying whenever you get to steal an opponent's creature and smack them with it. I think this is one of the cards that has won me a game, just because you draw it at the right time, your opponent has a massive creature, you're really happy to have this. Next up, we have Violent Impact. This just lets you hit lands as well as artifacts, as well as cycle for 2. And then, of course, I tried to jam one sweeper in here, Vanquish the Horde. It's very cost effective and just destroys all creatures. Also, it has a really high mana value. So if you reveal it with one of those damage effects equal to mana value, you're really happy. For ramp, we have a lot of the usual suspects in Soul Ring, Arcane Signet. We're playing Wayfarer's Bauble as well. Just generically a good card, but also works well because it goes to your graveyard, giving you another card that you can feed to the exile of Kroxa and Kunoros. Mindstone, it's a mana rock that you can sack, draw a card, and you have another card in your graveyard, again for exiling purposes. Commander Seer, very similar. You can tap it, sack it, draw a card, you have another thing you can exile. Supply Crystal is probably one of the worst of the bunch, just 3 mana rock that you can cycle for 2. And then probably some of the best kind of graveyard filling ramp cards. We have these kind of Seize the Spoil effects. You discard a card, draw 2 cards, create a treasure token, or in the case of Big Score and these other 2, you discard a card, draw 2 cards, and create 2 treasures. This can allow you to cast your commander turn 5. And then you play your commander, you get back another big creature, and you're a problem. And for Reanimation, we have some other effects besides our commander, to just make it a little bit easier to get stuff out of our graveyard whenever we want. One of those being Mizzix Mastery. We have a lot of powerful instant and sorceries in this deck, so being able to grab the one that you want back, like maybe a Breach the Multiverse, is really, really nice. You probably aren't going to be casting the Overload because we don't have that many, but it is just one of my favorite cards in red, so it's in the deck. Living Death is another kind of all-star card in terms of reanimation effects. Basically what it does is you swap the creatures that are on the battlefield with the ones that are in your graveyard. Everybody does this though. So everybody takes the creatures out of their graveyard, puts all their creatures from the board in their graveyard, and boom. You probably have more big threats than your opponents, and if you don't, probably don't want to cast it, just a heads up. Still a really powerful effect that can help you out when the opponents kind of are getting out to a fast start. You just threw a bunch of things in your graveyard, but you have nothing on the battlefield. It's like a sweeper and reanimation all tied up in one, so really good in this deck. Unburial Rites, this has flashback and it reanimates your stuff. It's really good. Brave Upheaval. Part of the reason we're playing this is because it has basic land cycling, so we can get whatever land we need, so we can keep hitting our land drop to cast our commander, fix our mana, but it also can reanimate creature from a graveyard, so you can steal your opponent's creatures, and you give it haste, and so you can swing it immediately. Now, Breach the Multiverse, this card, if you haven't seen it, super powerful. Everybody mills 10. You get to reanimate a creature or planeswalker from everyone's graveyard. This card I mentioned works really well with the Subpunctual Primordial. It works well because Subpunctual Primordial says when it enters, for each opponent, you may put up to 1 target creature from that player's graveyard onto the battlefield under your control. So you play the Breach of the Multiverse, you mill a bunch of cards into everyone's graveyard, you grab 1 creature from everyone's graveyard. From your graveyard, hopefully you grab the Primordial, and then it enters and you grab 1 more creature from everyone's graveyard except for yours. With 1 Breach of the Multiverse, you can get 7 creatures on the battlefield, 2 from each opponent and Primordial from yourself, which is pretty cool. And lastly, we have Push Pull. There's a removal early game, just destroy, or well, maybe not even early game, but you can use it as removal, and you can also, similar to Grave Upheaval, reanimate 2 creatures and then give them haste. You do have to sacrifice them at the beginning of the next end step though, but it's just a really cool effect, and it's removal, and it's really high mana value because you combine the mana value of both halves, and so you reveal this. This is another card that can deal 8 damage to your opponents, which is super cool. And then lastly, the lands here. We're playing Command Tower, Exotic Orchard as your kind of generic commander lands that hit hopefully all the colors you could want. We're playing 2 Snarls here just because we're playing so many basics. So hopefully it's pretty easy to go ahead and reveal one of your basics and have it come in untapped. We have Ash Barrens. This card is really good in the deck. I think it's pretty good in the deck because, once again, you need a lot of cards in your graveyard for your commander. So you can cycle this for 1 mana, grab whatever land you need, play that land. It's effectively like you're playing a tapped land, but this one also puts a card in your graveyard. And then Nomad Outpost taps for all her mana colors. It's tapped, unfortunately, but still really good. And then again, Vault of the Archangel works really well in this deck because we are playing big, chunky creatures. So being able to pay, let's say, 5 mana to give them all Death Touch and Lifelink can really give you a lot of life total, which will make it hard for your opponents to deal with you, which is nice. In terms of ways you can upgrade the deck, I think you can just put in more powerful bombs. So like maybe you put in like Valgavoth, this big, just hard to remove value generating creature. Maybe Ulamog the Defiler, which I believe should work with your commander because your commander exiles stuff. And Ulamog gets +1 counters equal to the greatest mana value among cards in exile. And then it has Annihilator equal to the number of +1 counters. So good for that. You can play a bunch of MDFCs to try and increase the mana value of your deck so that you get more powerful triggers off your Keen Duelist type effects. I think one of the most powerful kind of like reanimation spells that you could add to the deck is Incarnation Technique. This allows you to mill a bunch of cards and reanimate multiple creatures if you demonstrate, which you should probably do that. Lastly, I think there's a few graveyard filler cards that you could add to your deck to make it a lot easier to get creatures in your graveyard. Rules on Death is a really good one. At the beginning of your main phase, you mill 3 cards and then you can return one of those for 1 mana and 3 life. So if you mill something that you really wanted, you can grab it back. Otherwise, you're just really pumping cards into your graveyard for just 2 mana, which is nice. Out of the Tomes is very powerful if it gets to stick around long enough. At the beginning of your upkeep, you put 2 counters on it and you mill equal to the number of counters on it. And so first turn, 2 cards in your graveyard, next turn 4, next turn 6. Really good. Mesmeric Orb. This might trigger your opponents, but it mills so many cards for you and your opponents, so you have even more things to reanimate from their graveyards, which is pretty cool. Lastly, I wanted to shout out Protection Racket as another way to maybe take advantage of the high mana values in your deck and just draw a bunch of cards. Basically, at the beginning of your upkeep, you reveal the top card of your library, and for each opponent, they either can pay life equal to that card's mana value, or you put it into your hand. You do this for each opponent. So you reveal 3 cards and potentially draw up to 3 additional ones. And then you do also get to do your draw step. So this could be potentially 3 additional cards, or your opponent is going to be taking 8 damage, 7 damage, 3 damage, so that you don't get the cards in your hand. I thought I would go ahead and show you a bit of how I would mulligan with this deck, knowing a bit of like what kind of hands do you want to keep and what hands you want to mulligan. Of course, sometimes you're just going to draw a dud. There's not much you can do about that. That's magic. But knowing what to keep can be helpful. This hand I would say is pretty good. You have 2 lands, you have a cycling card, and then you have a way to discard a bunch of cards, as well as just some powerful reanimation effects. And the top card was going to be a land, and you would start off pretty strong with Palantir of Orthonac. Here, this is a hand that I'd probably keep because you have the Palantir, as well as the Balrog of Moria can cycle to give you treasure tokens, so hopefully you can get to the mana value that you want. First card was going to be another mountain, so it's a little bit of mountain heavy hand. Hopefully you can find ways to fix your mana, but you would have been able to cycle the Balrog, which would be helpful. This is another hand that I'd probably keep. You have 3 lands, you have Seize the Spoils. Notably, a lot of these hands so far haven't had a ton of like wheels to fill up a lot of cards in your graveyard, but you can still just ramp into one of the big creatures in your hand. This one would have rounded out your mana colors, which would have been nice. All right, well, this hand, I see a Soul Ring, I see a Palantir. This hand is just amazing. Vanquish the Horde, probably not going to be super useful in this hand where you don't have a ton of white pips, but overall, really good hand. This one, I would probably still keep this one. You have a lot of cycling effects. Hopefully you draw into some more impactful effects on the top of your library. Maybe would have flooded out a bit and bit of a slow hand, but still. Okay, this one probably would have been a little bit cooked, but all right, this hand, again, I probably keep this one. Stitcher Supplier, mill 3, hopefully hit some big stuff. Faithless Looting fixes this hand. And you also have Mind Stone, Living Death, Again, pretty good. This is a really good hand. You have a way to ramp into Breach of the Multiverse and, swamp cycling to hopefully hit more land drops, into Pirate Village, into Breach of the Multiverse. Pretty good hand. This one, you have some milling with Cemetery Tampering. Probably okay. This is probably one of the hands where I'd be tempted to mulligan just because you don't have a lot of ways to discard cards. And you don't really have a ton of interaction. Yes, you have Vanquish the Horde, but you'd have to find another white source. But you do have Arcane Signet. Alright, here's the first hand that I would definitely not keep. This hand, I think you could actually keep it. You have the Wayfarer's Bauble to hopefully find yourself a red source, and then you just seize the spoils. Alright, this is another one of the hands. This is probably the second hand that I'd probably say you don't want to keep this too much, just because not much going on. Yeah, not much going on besides lands and maybe a few recycling cards, so a very slow hand. This one's keepable. You have Wayfarer's Bauble into Balrog, Vanquish the Horde maybe, another discard card. Not hitting a ton of wheels in these hands, which is a little concerning, but alright, no lander, no keep. This one, probably decently playable, just because you have the Grave Upheaval, find all your mana sources, and okay, maybe that's an exaggeration. You don't have a lot of card draw or wheel effects. Okay, Palantir off the top fixes it. This one, this one, you could probably keep it. You have a lot of cycling effects and a wheel effect, so you'll put a lot of cards in your graveyard, but you won't be putting a lot of reanimation targets in your graveyard yet, so not great. Okay, this one I think you can safely keep. You have a Soul Ring, a Faithless Looting. It's a one lander, but I think you can find ways out of it, especially if your Soul Ring sticks around. If your opponents have Mana Tithe on turn 1, maybe not great. Second land fixes it. Alright, this hand, I think it's playable. Thomas Dragon gets you another land. Hopefully you draw one. No. Okay. A little, probably would have missed the land drop there, so not great, but actually that last hand you would have been able to fix, or like you would have been shuffling with your tutoring, so who knows. This hand, you have Wayfarer's Bauble, Cathartic Reunion. I think you probably can keep it. Alright, quickly, wanted to try out one of these hands. Here we have an interesting hand. We have Stitcher Supplier to fill our graveyard a bunch, so turn 1, you draw Stitcher Supplier, mill 3. Oops, we milled and Palantir, but we also have Faithless Looting. We can play the Snarl, reveal the Mountain, and then probably just cycle a Dirge of the Dead, targeting Stitcher Supplier. And draw. Next turn, you get a land drop. At some point, your opponent might tack into the Stitcher Supplier. Maybe you can get rid of it, and if you do, that would be good. Probably cast Seize the Spoils. We do have Faithless Looting in the graveyard, so we could cast that, but put the Sarah's Emissary in the graveyard. Draw 2, create a treasure. Play the Mountain. Probably cycle the Ash Barrens and then cast the Faithless Looting. Alright, we have a choice here. We can either crack our treasure to cast our commander, get back one of our big creatures from our graveyard, or we could plan to save our mana for next turn and cast a Breach the Multiverse. This would probably also depend on what your opponents are up to. If it's turn 5, if your opponents are threatening you, you could certainly play out your commander, exile 5 cards, reanimate Sarah's Emissary. They can't deal damage to you or your creatures, which is quite nice. Or you could grab the Soul of Eternity and get a massive creature on the board. Alternatively, you also have the option just to cycle for 2, the easy prey, and hopefully find something a little bit better to do than just not casting anything. Overall, I would say this is a very good game. You have turn 5, you're getting something big onto the battlefield. You're setting up for later on, you can cast Breach of the Multiverse, and then you can cast Mystic Mastery to cast it again the following turn. It's going to be a pretty darn cool game. We'll go ahead and playtest one more hand. This one I got was pretty lucky. We have a Faithless Looting in a mountain, so we don't have a lot of lands, but who knows what's going to happen. All right, discard 2. One thing I will say, when you're playing this deck, I highly recommend that you put your kind of graveyard on the side that's towards the center of the play group and just arrange it out as a big array of cards so your opponents know what's in your graveyard, instead of kind of hiding it behind your deck. Play Soul Ring, and we can go ahead and cast Lightning Greaves. Actually, I probably wouldn't cast Lightning Greaves here. Instead, I would cast the Faithless Looting from exile. Draw 2, discard 2, so discard the Dreadsire, the Rune Grinder. Here, you can just hold up one of your, or hold up any of your instants. So if you wait to the end stat before yours, you can go ahead and cast Big Score and make some treasures, and then maybe cast your commander and get Ulamog Dreadsire down. Alternatively, you could cast it on your turn right here, because then you can go ahead and cast Lightning Greaves with one of the treasures, and maybe even give whatever you reanimate haste. So for that reason, I would probably cast the Big Score on my turn. Go ahead and discard the Heartwarming Redemption, draw 2, create 2 treasures. Because we don't have a white and a black source, we would have to draw one of them. I'm not going to crack the treasure for the Lightning Greaves because we'd probably prefer just to be able to cast our commander next turn. Though you could do it and just plan to not cast your commander, and maybe you could just dig for more value, hopefully land drops, so you're not falling behind. Alright, so we have the opportunity to cast our commander. Unfortunately, it would involve exiling the Primordial here, so I'd be tempted to, if you can, hold up the Angel Song and just cast some more discard spells this turn. Hopefully fill your graveyard. Here we managed to hit a Plains, which is very good. In this position, I think this is one of the kind of like decision points. What do you discard if you're going to discard more cards? Because if we were to cast our commander at this point, I guess we technically have enough mana to do so. We're going to end up exiling one of our creatures because the only spells we have in our graveyard are these. So we're going to exile a creature, which generally kind of creatures in terms of order of spells or cards in my graveyard that I would exile. It's very easy to exile lands. We have no way to get lands back. It's easy to do the same with artifacts and enchantments because we have no way to get those back. But instant sorceries we can get back with Mystic Mastery, which is 1 in our 99, so not really crucial to plan around. But if you do it a little, maybe you can get the lucky top deck and cast something big from your graveyard. And then creatures is really nice because maybe you get a mass reanimate spell, sort of like Living Death. So in this case, we have 4 cards that we could exile, and then that we wouldn't mind exiling too much, and we have 4 creatures, so we'd end up having to exile one of our creatures. In this case, I think you can probably get away with just casting your commander if you want, because Rune Grinder isn't going to typically make or break your game. It's just a big creature with menace that wheels if it dies. In this position, if I wasn't feeling particularly threatened, I'd probably just cast the Lightning Greaves and rest up, and then maybe we can get another card in our graveyard, so that we can keep as many creatures in our graveyard as possible. Okay, in this case, we managed to draw Breach the Multiverse, so it's really good because we have the Primordial here, which allows us to also return another one of our creatures, or the opponent's creatures, from the graveyard. Hopefully our opponents are playing really cool stuff. If that's the case, we're returning a lot of really cool stuff. If not, we can just grab one thing from everyone's graveyard and grab like the Infernal Sovereign or the Ulamog's Dreadsire, and we have a really big and really cool creature on our battlefield. Furthermore, we also have Greaves, so we can give something nice haste, which is cool. And let's just go ahead and see what we would mill. We didn't really mill anything super big. The creatures that we milled was Soul of Eternity, Timeless Dragon, and Gloomfang Mauler. Probably the coolest one of the bunch is Soul of Eternity. So if we get this on the battlefield, we can go ahead and maybe find something cool to do with it, like activate our Vault of the Archangel. So there is that potential. So that might be a case for getting back Soul of Eternity. But I think from these Goldfishing sessions, you can see just how cool this deck can be. And hopefully you have a little bit of fun with this deck if you end up building it. That is going to do it for this deck building video, if you will. Thank you so much for stopping by, listening in. Hopefully this gave you some interesting ideas for your next commander deck, or maybe you will end up picking up this deck. So let me know if you have any feedback. This is the first time I've done a sort of commander deck tech, so video format's a little new to me. But anyways, have a nice morning, evening, night, afternoon, wherever and whenever you're watching. Take care of yourself. Ciao.